Hi, we're going to be doing a book review this morning on import and an export business. It's by Jennifer Dorcey, Entrepreneur Press, and it's by Entrepreneur Media Incorporated. It's basically about start your own import-export business. I put some information up here on the board. The world does about $1 trillion worth of international trade, so trade is a big business out there. U.S. exports for trade is $772 billion. And the U.S. Department of Commerce is 1-800-USA-TRADE is the number that you want to call, most important number up there as far as international trade goes. That's the number you want to call to start out with. There's a lot of information in this book to set you up in the trade business. First, if you're going to go work for a brokerage, you're going to probably, you're still going to need a license. It's about, I think it's $5,000 per month. You don't have to have a license, but anything else you have to have a license for it. So you want to call that 1-800 number before you even get involved in the business, just to get some good basic information. But anything else, it's $5,000. You don't have to. I think it's $5,000. You don't have to have a license. I checked this book, bought this book for one of the reasons was over the years I've noticed a lot of niche businesses. A lot of niche retailers that I thought, a lot of small town America, there's just different parts of the country. I used to drive a semi-truck. And I used to look for those kind of businesses that were selling stuff from another foreign country that was unusual, that you normally didn't see in the big retailers. And that's kind of where most of the small-time international trade is going to, is small-time retailers and small business as far as that goes. The retailers, big retailers, are only covering certain kinds of international trade. So you get some small business retailers all across the United States that might sell stuff from European Union. They sell stuff from Africa. They might sell stuff from any country out there, South America, People's Republic of China. Usually it's art items that they usually are selling. Those businesses are kind of neat. I just noticed those over the years that they sell a lot of really neat stuff that you normally can't, a lot of times you can't buy at the big retailer. One of the reasons why is the big retailers are looking for items that they can sell in mass quantities. And the niche retailer is looking for specialized items that may not sell by the mass, but have a customer base within the town that they live in, so they can now sell out there too, other than just the big retailers. So that's where some of your smaller stores come from that are selling those niche products and stuff, and usually it's art or pottery. There's a lot of pottery and stuff that comes from Mexico and some of the Mayan Indians and stuff. That's from South America that sell their pottery. I noticed in Chiapas the other day, I went into a store and he was selling Chiapas dolls in there, which you don't usually see in the big retailers, that the natives actually make, and you can actually buy one out there. A lot of times they usually cost a little bit more, so that's why they have, you know, so much business from the smaller retailers. They don't have the mass quantities of goods that the big retailers get, but they do get the niche in selling those items, so they usually you have to pay for them a little bit more. But yeah, if you have a good little niche, people want to pay a little bit extra money to cover your cost of shipping it over here, which is your biggest expense as far as the cost of bringing it over here and selling it, besides your personal expenses. Those items still do sell. So it's that's one of the reasons why I bought the book, is so that, you know, I could maybe sell it on the internet, or you can sell it in a small retail shop. Internet stores, and also retailers. Most of the little small businesses are doing both. They're doing some on the internet, and then they're doing some in a small retail store. It depends on what kind of city, little small town you have, as to how much business you get and how much business they're attracting out there for these niche items. But a lot of small communities out there in America do cater to the niche market, and so you get kind of a neat little arts district, which makes it real interesting. Any truck driver can tell you during Christmas time where to head to for these niche retailers around the country, as they shop out there too. Some of the important stuff in the book, besides just covering your basic setup, is basically the same thing that you'd have for any kind of small business. You have a fax machine, you would have a personal computer, different items that you'd have. Fax machine is really important in the import-export business, because you're going to have to fax stuff over to a bank, usually to make some checks on credit and stuff. That's one of the most important things. And you have to have an intermediary. An intermediary, which usually is a bank, that's going to do credit checks for you for where the country you're going to be importing their goods from. This is pretty important, and there's a list in on the back page. Back 4 pages of the book has all kinds of internet sites and everything else. There's also there's an Import-Export Bank of the United States that governs that. So you have to have an intermediary, because you don't want to get ripped off. You don't want to send $2,000 to South America or Africa or Asia and not get your goods back. You want to make sure that they're good sources of trade, and they're going to be good. You know, they're going to you're going to get a good deal from them. You're going to get the goods, and you also want quality goods. You don't want stuff that's broken up and stuff. So that bank is pretty important as far as handling being the intermediary between those. I also check for credit. You don't want somebody that's got bad credit because they haven't paid sent all the stuff they're supposed to, or the business is bankrupt, and you want to make sure you got an intermediary. Another important thing is all the people that are involved in it. There's different kinds of shipping. There's a different, when you're acting as a import-export agent, you're going to have to negotiate the terms of shipment with who's going to import your, ship out your goods and stuff. And there's different kinds of deals, so you're also acting as an agent as to what you're going to cover and what they're going to cover. So you have to be a deal maker, and you have to be able to get that in writing to cover you and also cover them, make sure you got a good agreement. So everything has to be on paper. And there's forms in here, the practice forms, that the book shows you that you can use to send to them, and then they will send something back to you, so you have a good source of information as to what the shipping terms are going to be, and you have to get that in writing, because everything in import-export has to be in writing. So the book has all that information in there as far as the make sure you get that in writing. But there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 items in here listed on shipping terms. I'm not going to cover them all, but you have to, that's a lot of negotiation goes on between between you and the warehouse where you're going to receive the goods at. Also, if you're a small retailer, everything in import-export is going to govern your markup. You have to cover your costs as to all that goes on from point A to point B is governed by markup. And usually that's going to be a manufacturer's cost is one of them. Customs brokerage fee. Insurance. Ocean freight charges. Import tariffs. So you got manufacturer's cost, you got customs brokers, you got insurance, you got ocean freight, and your import tariffs. Those are all the biggies that govern your markup costs and bring the goods over here and what you're going to sell your item at for the final deal. So like a small business stuff, usually you're going to pay a lot more for than the large retailers. They get discounts, and that's part of their solution to it. When they mass send various items or whatever they're going to sell or retail or bring in, you're not going to get that discount because you're not going to do as much business with them as a huge retailer does. So your markup, you got to make sure that you have a good niche is going to cover your markup exposure. You got to make sure that you can sell it and make a little bit of profit from it. So all these are pretty important in the import-export business. And the book covers all those. Tells you about each one of these. Some of those are negotiable, and as a negotiator, you have to negotiate that. The only other thing that covers some of the there's about a lot of departments that you don't think they're part of international trade listed in here, which I thought was kind of unusual, that are part of it. Most of it, like the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Treasury, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Food and Drug Administration, U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the U.S. Postal Service, and the U.S. Small Business Administration of International Trade. That's a pretty important one too. That has all those are a part of it. I'll give you a good example. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, you think, well, those are just govern hunting and fishing licenses and regulation of wildlife here in America, but it also governs shipping live animals over here. There are guidelines you have to go by to bring stuff over here, especially like parrots. You know, if you want to sell parrots over here as a pet store or something like that, you have to go by their guidelines. They will get a flag at customs, and if you're not going by their guidelines, so you have to make sure that if you have something like any kind of live animal, like fish, a foreign fish, or a pet store or something like that, you want to make sure you either call them or use the federal government's website to make sure that you're in line. You don't want to get all that held up at customs because you didn't know what the guidelines were for live animals. So even if you don't think that that governs the international trade, you find out it does. That's one of the reasons why they list all these administrations. The U.S. Department of Transportation is another one. Usually, once you get it over the border, or here in America, you're going to have to make sure how you're shipping it's also important as far as trucking goes, or why it's rail, or it's by airlines. You have to make sure that stuff they can legally packaged and everything else, so that they can make sure that it's within regulation when you ship it by air or you ship it by train, so that there's no danger to the train or the airway or anything else. And our trucking too, because all that stuff has to be loaded on semi trucks, and you don't want the goods to get damaged or spill out all over the trailer. And I've had that happen several times. And you have to have it packaged a certain way. So it's still an important number, even if you don't think it is. One of the customs is one of the biggies. There's a whole chapter in the book on customs, and that filing your documents with customs and writing a invoice that is something that they will accept. And all the documents that you have to file to go through customs, it's pretty important. Usually it's Customs Form 7533, covers a lot of it. That covers a lot of your customs documents, so you have to have that in your import-export business. So there's a lot of lists in the book on the different forms you need. Well, that's about it for this book review.